to start. Tracy, we're expecting, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, 4, 6. We got 6.
Oh, and Tracy. So it's just Sandy.
Okay, can we start?
Sure.
Christie's off wandering around.
They're gonna love my article if it's published. It was that memo, basically.
Let's go ahead and get started. Christie, come back. We're missing 2 councilmen, but I understand Genevieve is coming. We just don't know where she's at.
Tracy's not.
Tracy Randler will not be here tonight. And staff reports, we're going to wait till the end. Was that correct on that?
Yes. Unless Ken has anything. Nope.
Okay. We're going to start then with item number 2, Rigid 38 Commercial District Feasibility and Formation Study. Oh, I'm sorry, we have public comment, of course, Jesse. Oh, I'm not supposed to know your name. Okay. Yeah. Please do state your name and your address.
Jesse Hill, 2995 Chase Street. And council, thank you for having the opportunity to speak to you guys today. In celebration and respect of Sunshine Week this week, March 16th and through 22nd, where citizens, journalists, and elected officials such as yourself celebrate transparency and open government. I'm excited that you guys are going to discuss tonight later maintaining open video access to council study sessions. Last week I forwarded, I believe all of you, my thoughts, so I won't go in too much detail into those. But really hope later we can talk about how we're actually going to improve citizen access out here. Specifically when it comes to, I believe upcoming, a council study session, the retreat that goes on. 2 weeks ago I came to one of these great study sessions and talked about looking forward to the discussions on, say, the housing study. And unfortunately, the decision was made to, we'll discuss this at the retreat. And in reality, it kind of happens, that's more of an off-the-record retreat where there aren't minutes, there aren't audio, there isn't video recording, and the public and community really loses a lot of benefit, I think, from having that. So, I ask you, even the date and location of that retreat hasn't really been posted much, and it's unfortunate because those are the things where I think we can focus on getting more access out to the citizens. So I ask that when you talk about item 3, study sessions, you include that retreat also in there because it is a very important part about it and how we're going to overall improve the access. And I think I appreciate any funding concerns out there, but I believe there's money not only in a variety of accounts out there, plus the increased revenues that should be coming in, whether across the board, that we can fund the basic roles of government, which include transparency and making it available to our citizens. So thank you all.
Thank you. And we have someone else who wishes to speak. Could you give your name and be sure and use the microphone?
Sorry, I can't seem to. Nancy Snow, you need an address too?
An address would be great.
11155 West 40th.
Thank you, Nancy.
Oh,
Go ahead and pull that microphone forward so we can hear you.
I was going to say somebody glued it.
We did that on purpose.
Anyway, I wanted to speak on, I think it's the 4th item, this discussion of study sessions and the cost. And a rumor I heard that maybe there might be some stopping of the video, which I hope not. I want to speak as strongly as I can against that. And for those of you who haven't been involved in the city for so long, I'd like to take a minute and give you a little history. Right after we became a city, frankly, an awful lot of the city's business was done in private. In fact, it was sort of a joke. Sometimes there were 2 or 3 times in the middle of a council meeting that they had a, quote, executive session. That was true of the Planning Commission also. So finally the city got sued, only time in my life I've ever sued anybody, The Sentinel newspapers and I sued the city of Wheat Ridge and the Planning Commission and all the members. And I think it was a rather mild order, but basically to start having things done in public. And the order came down the same day that the charter passed, also with the section on executive sessions. But despite those changes, an awful lot of the business of the city seems to be done at other times. Things happen in the study session, and worse than that, these little pre-meetings that were so common, that were out in the little room out there, sometimes with the door open, sometimes with the door shut. And basically, in terms of just being an ordinary citizen, you know, it's very frustrating, because by the time something gets to the city council meeting, frankly, you can tell, even if you were a brand neophyte, you can tell that everything's been decided. So I was very, very pleased when you started, first of all, more or less got rid of the pre-meetings and started televising the study sessions. And so I beg you, I don't know what it costs, but I really think it's important that you keep those open. And the only thing I have to say is that I wish the sound was a little better, and I'd like to say to all of you, please speak up, because I do watch them from home, and sometimes I think I have no idea what that person's saying. So please, please, I ask you, I don't care what it costs, it's really fair to those of us who would like to be involved in city government that they're televised. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. Can we move on to item number 2? Ridge 38 Commercial District Feasibility and Formation Study. Do we have someone speaking here?
Yes.
A whole bunch of someone.
Yeah, we'll have our guests come up. As council, if you remember, this was a project that the city council funded through Wheat Ridge 2020. And Britta Fisher is here with her consultants and board member to talk about the study that was completed, and we're here to give you the first update on that. So, Britta, or you want to turn it over?
Janice Hoppy and 7000 West 38th Avenue. So this is Brad and Anna with PUMA, which is Progressive Urban Management Associates. I got it. And they have been working on the study. They've worked with several different areas, which they will tell you about, but some of them smaller and some of them bigger. And they will let you know what we've been researching and what has come of it.
Sure, my name is Brad Siegel. Thank you. My name is Brad Siegel. I reside in Denver at 1225 Detroit Street. Our business address is 1616 17th Street, Denver.
I'm Anna Jones with PUMA and also reside in Denver at 1428 St. Paul Street.
Anna and myself are team members in Wheat Ridge. What we do is we work with downtowns and we work with commercial districts all over the state and all over the country. My own background, I've been doing this about 30 years. I used to work with the Downtown Denver Partnership in downtown Denver. And in fact, my first job with them is I ran a storefront development office in lower downtown back in the late 80s and early 90s. Anna joined our firm about 14 years ago. And one of our specialties is working with business districts and communities to figure out public-private partnerships for business districts. And that was our engagement along West 38th. We were engaged back in the fall, back in October, we got going. And we were engaged to find what would be the best mechanism to really mobilize the property and business owners to be good partners in moving West 38th Avenue forward. So there are a variety of models to do that, and we talked to a number of property owners and businesses up and down the street. We're a little old school in our approach, so we went and talked to people So we went door to door and talked to as many people as we could, as many business and property owners. We also worked under the direction of the Ridge at 38 Leadership Task Force, and both Janice and Jerry are here tonight from the task force. In talking to different property and business owners, we heard a number of things. One is there is a great desire for the property and business owners to have a stronger voice in what's going on along West 38th. The sense is that the corridor has been through a bit of a turbulent time, but it is definitely a healing period now, and there's a lot of optimism about the new businesses moving in, about some of the new improvements that have been installed. And the property and business owners that we talked to wanted to be a more reliable and a more dependable voice to work with the city to make those things happen. So we looked at several different ideas and different entities. We looked at a downtown development authority, we looked at a business improvement district, and we also looked at a voluntary membership organization, which are all ways that property owners can come together and they can pool resources to make improvements. Early on, we ruled out the Downtown Development Authority. It's very similar to the urban renewal powers that the city currently has, and we thought that that would be duplicative. So that led us to a business improvement district or a voluntary membership organization. And in working with the Leadership Task Force and then in convening meetings where we gathered a number of property owners together in February, we had 2 meetings well attended. Each meeting had about 15 to 20 different property and business owners. And the property and business owners, the vast majority preferred a mechanism that would really be sustaining from year to year and would raise reliable revenue so they could truly be a dependable partner with the city and also have a legitimate voice in terms of decision making on investments out there. So the consensus, certainly from the Leadership Task Force and from a majority of the property and business owners that we met with, was to pursue a business improvement district. Now I have a handout. Is it standard procedure just to send this around? Okay, great. This is hot off the press, although it's been in development. It's been in development for about 6 weeks. And when I think what I'll do is I'll just walk you through the document, and then I'll ask Jerry and Janice for closing comments on this. And then Anna Jones is really here in part for legal questions. She's our legal eagle. So when we get into technical questions related to the notion of a business improvement district, Anna can be very helpful in addressing those. So what you have in front of you is an outline, and this will become if a business improvement district is formed, this becomes essentially the contract or the business plan, if you will, for what the improvement district will do. And on the first page is essentially just restates our process, starting to work on the corridor back in the fall, and the consensus that emerged among the property and business owners that we talked to. At the bottom of page 1, we talk about the benefits, why a business improvement district. 1, a unified voice for West 38th, and particularly among the property and business owners. It will allow the city to have a partner, again, that represents all the property owners, all the businesses, instead of trying to figure out individually what their different, what their differing viewpoints may be. Secondly, it is a reliable source of funding. So a business improvement district does create an assessment, a special assessment on property. It is mandatory once it's imposed. It is collected along with property tax. So it does create a ongoing source of funding for West 38th. Third, it would be run by the property and business owners. So under the state statutes, a business improvement district is actually a subdivision of the state. It is enabled by the city. The city would be required to have a public hearing, and this body, the city council, would be required to vote on its formation. But when it's formed, it has a board of property and business owners that govern the money and govern the activities from day to day. And then lastly, we hope that it would be a source of leverage, that it could leverage a variety of different improvements and monies that may come down its way. A few examples, before I go on, a few examples of other business improvement districts in the area. West Colfax in Denver has a business improvement district that was formed about 5 years ago. It runs from Federal to Sheridan, and it was very effective. It doesn't have a particularly large budget, but it was very effective at leveraging money. If you're familiar with the corridor, you may have known that it recently benefited from about $3 or $4 million in streetscape improvements from a City of Denver bond issue. In Denver, the policy is that the improvement district, the business improvement district, must be created as a partner, and then the city invests in those bond improvements in Denver. So there are a number of these business improvement districts that have popped up there. Other examples, Alameda Corridor in Lakewood, Havana and Aurora. Our team is currently working in Old Town, in Arvada, on a very similar proposal for a business improvement district there. Page 2 gets into the specifics of how a business improvement district would work along West 38th Avenue. So the proposed name, Ridge at 38 bid. We want to build on the branding and the investment that's been made to date on the corridor. The boundaries of the business improvement district are proposed to only be the Main Street section of West 38th. So essentially from Marshall to Wadsworth. Marshall to Wadsworth, it's about a third of the corridor. We are not recommending the remainder of the corridor at this time, partially because the middle of the corridor is heavily residential. The business improvement district applies only to commercial properties. Only commercial properties would be involved. And then the eastern part of the corridor near Sheridan already has improvements and did not evidence as much an appetite for the business improvement district as the Main Street. So it's a relatively compact area from Marshall to Wadsworth. It includes 44 commercial parcels and 37 different property owners that would be bonding together to form a bid. The work program on page 2, this is a menu, and that board that I mentioned, the Board of Property and Business Owners, these are the types of expenditures they would make from year to year. So we're creating a menu where they could choose a variety of improvements and services. Marketing and events to attract new businesses, customers to the corridor. Physical improvements, banners and cosmetic improvements. And if the city does choose to invest in more extensive capital improvements, you'd have a partner that could contribute to the maintenance of that and also could enhance that in a variety of ways. Maintenance over and above what it would be expected from the city. And then lastly, and maybe importantly, advocacy. An advocate for the corridor, providing again that unified voice to help guide the city in terms of policies and different issues that may affect it. Page 3. We have worked diligently with the property owners and the businesses to find a cost mechanism that makes sense and also is compatible with the real estate along the corridor. So we looked at rental rates, we looked at what we thought businesses could absorb based upon our experience in other corridors. The balance in pricing a business improvement district is to make sure we create enough funds where we're going to make a difference, but at the same time we don't want to put undue stress on a small business. So after working with the businesses and the property owners on this, the formula we came up with was 5 cents. 5 cents per square foot of lot plus 5 cents per square foot of building. So we're adding those two things, a nickel per square foot of lot plus a nickel per square foot of building. That's on an annual basis. So we have some examples, and some individuals at the table are pulled out here for examples. So a certain kitchen furnishings store and showroom along the corridor. When you add their square footage together, they're looking at about $1,000 per year to contribute to this. A certain construction company that has been well established along the corridor, looking at about $1,400 per year on an annual basis. But those examples give you a sense of how this assessment would work on properties. About at the end of our presentation here, but there are a few other considerations I wanted to highlight. What was very important to the property owners is that some said the 5 cents might be okay to start, but we want to make sure this doesn't become a dime and a quarter and ratchet up very quickly. So there would be a cap on assessments. We're proposing that the first 2 years that the bid is in existence, there would be no opportunity for increase. And then the board of directors, if they so choose, after year 3, they could consider an increase up to 5% per year to keep up with cost of living and other expenses. Governance of the board, we're proposing a relatively small board since we only have 37 property owners and 44 properties. But we are proposing a 5 to 7 member board. The state statute allows anywhere from a 5 to 11 member board. And we would propose that it represent a variety of business types along the corridor. So there'd be someone representing retail, restaurants, service businesses, automobile-related businesses, really capture the whole diverse array of businesses that are there. In terms of program management, we are proposing that the bid would contract for services. Mostly it's going to be fairly small, so if it does have staff, it would contract for staff, perhaps part-time, and contract with existing companies or nonprofits to deliver services. There are 2 items in here that we've talked to city staff about, and we want to make sure that council has a level of comfort before we move to the streets with the petition drive. But we were looking for creative and reasonable ways that the city could, if it so desires to support this effort, that it could support it. So the 2 ways that we've come up with, and this is actually similar to what we're working on in Arvada right now, we're proposing that the city would consider actually matching these funds. So these assessments in total would raise approximately $62,500 a year. We are proposing that the city consider, and that's obviously not for tonight, but if the proponents bring petitions in, that at that time the city consider a match on those assessments. And then secondly, and this is very standard in all bids we work in, that the city construct what's called a base level of services agreement. In other words, the city would document the existing services that are currently provided in this section of West 38th, so that the property owners know with certainty that they're not going to be replacing something that they already have, that if they form a bid, they'd actually be enhancing, they'd be adding to what's out there. I'll end and then kick it to Jerry and Janice. I'll end with the process for forming a bid. We're meeting with you tonight because we are hoping within the next 2 to 3 weeks, to actually initiate the process to form it. And before we initiate the process to form it, we want to make sure, again, that the council has a comfort level with the bid concept and some of the items within this outline. But the process to form the bid essentially is 3 steps. It starts with a property owner-initiated petition. So the property owners at the table tonight, they are part of a group that is willing to initiate that petition and go door to door to encourage other property owners to sign it. So the petition is step 1. The proponents need to secure petitions that would represent a majority of both acreage and value. So petitions representing a majority of acreage and value, that's step 1. Step 2, those petitions would be brought to the city. The clerk would verify the accuracy of those petitions, and then a public hearing would be scheduled at one of the council's regular meetings. Public hearing to allow both proponents, and if there are any opponents, to come talk about the Business Improvement District. The Business Improvement District would be established by ordinance or resolution at that time. So that's anticipated sometime this summer, probably in June or July. The last step, there's a 3rd step, because we're special in Colorado, we get a bonus, and we're all familiar with Tabor. So the Business Improvement District is subject to Tabor. It would require then a second round of approval from the property and business owners. It would require a vote. And that vote would be held in November. It would be a mail ballot that would only go to those affected property and business owners along the corridor. So this is not a citywide vote. This is only within the 44 affected properties along the corridor would be that final vote. Provided all that happens by the 1st of next year, by January of next year, the Ridge at 38th Business Improvement District would be formed, open for business, and would start receiving funds. So Jerry and Janice, I'll pass it back to you guys. Any final thoughts?
One of the things that Brad didn't touch on is that we had heard from some people that were outside of the boundaries that they would be interested in also being part of the Business Improvement District. So on page 3 at the bottom, it says recommended program management structure, and you'll see in the second paragraph under that heading where they can opt in. And it's $250 per year or 5 cents per square foot of building, whichever is more. Realizing the reason why it's so much less is because they wouldn't necessarily directly be affected by, let's say, some of the direct maintenance or streetscaping, but on the overall marketing program, they would be involved in the marketing program, and so then would benefit from the marketing program. So when we were looking at this, we were trying to make sure that it was inclusive of all the businesses in the area. One of the things that came out of that was the cap, because there were some people who we heard from that said, well, we're nervous about that, so we wanted to make sure that that was in there. And then also the voluntary opt-in, so that we're just trying really hard to be inclusive with all the businesses in the area. Another thing that came up in some of the meetings is that there used to be a voluntary, like a merchants association, a voluntary merchants association. And one of the people that used to be on that association was there, and he said the problem with that is that you ended up with a bunch of people doing, like a little bit of people doing a lot of work for everybody, and the volunteers burn out because they were the only ones, there were a few of them doing the work for everyone, and B, it kind of made some bad feelings because they felt like people were kind of free riding on other people's hard work. So I think those are. Jerry, do you have anything from?
Hi. Actually, I went out with Mara from 2020. We actually reached out to probably at least 20 businesses from my shop all the way around. We stopped at Wheat Ridge Slackery, across the street over to A1 and back down the other side. So we talked to a lot of different businesses, and I was really surprised at how open people were to the concept. And like Brad said, we also had 2 meetings, which was very well attended. And we want this to be an all-inclusive thing because, Mike Stite said it the best. There needs to be some healing along 38th Avenue. And then we had some discussion, well, is the time right? Is it not right? We don't know. But then I got to thinking, what a better way to heal? Let's get everybody together. We're all in the same boat. We all want to see everybody else succeed. I think this is a great way to do it. And, and just put the street behind us. Let's move forward and do something positive. So that's one thing. Then just kind of a little, side note, I've got an open space, and it's amazing the amount of calls, people coming by, 3 years ago or 4 years ago when I had it, nobody was interested in the property. Today, thanks to what's going on 38th Avenue, I get a minimum of, almost a call a day. Somebody is interested in the property with pretty much no advertising or anything like that. And everybody says, I like what's going on 38th Avenue. I see it as up and coming. I see it as a new area. We're priced out of Denver. We're coming to Wheat Ridge. And nothing but positive as far as, and I know that's slanted because these are people that want to open up a business in Wheat Ridge, but still, I can't believe the amount of people that really see what's going on in Wheat Ridge and really appreciate it. And I see nothing but good happening on 38th Avenue, and I think this is just another piece to the puzzle that, that's been put together many years ago, and I think it would be nice to move forward on this. That's it. Thank you.
Sorry, one more thought. Another thing that came up was that this would be something that would be, regardless of what happens in the future on the street, this would be something that it would be a merchants group ran by the merchants, owned and operated by the merchants. It's our money, and we would be able to spend it in marketing and stuff like that. Hanging flower baskets on the lights, stuff like that. So this is something that it's not dependent on what happens on the street with the actual street later on in the future. This is something that is separate of that's looking towards our future as business and property owners.
Does council have some questions? Sounds good. Council have some questions or discussion? Ms. Davis.
Thanks for the work on this, and I just have some questions on the process. So it sounds like, there's 44 parcels, 33 owners. From the sounds of it, property owners, from the sounds of it, you've talked to about 20 folks. What's the overall, and then what's the overall feelings of it? Do you have still people that are vehemently against it? I guess I walked in on the 38th the road, well, I'm not supposed to say road anymore, but when the first initiation of what happened a few years ago, I rolled into council like the next council meeting, and it just seemed like there wasn't a lot of conversation, and like you said, time to mend fences, let's not have the Hatfields and McCoys kind of situation. So what are some of the honest, real discussions around that? I mean, I know that we've had a couple meetings, and I haven't been at those meetings, so, I'd be interested to understand the temperature. Are there 5 people that are really mad, or, just your feedback on that? That's one question, then I have another one after you're done.
Okay. Well, in general, that's why I said I was kind of surprised, because yes, I was kind of a little hesitant. I know, there are some people that are afraid, or not afraid, against what's going on 38th Avenue as far as the road reconfiguration. I don't think that, I think they're going to be against it no matter what, is going to happen. But at least this is something that is for the businesses, it is for us, it's for the corridor, that has nothing to do with the size of the street, the shape of the street, the curb alignment, or anything like that. So we really did try, though. It came up a few times. That's not what this is about. I mean, that's a whole different thing. This is about businesses getting together. And I think when people talk, people do get together, ideas are exchanged, nothing but good can come of that.
Okay.
I would say that most people, their response was, well, what does it look like? Can you paint the picture? Can you tell us, give us more detail? Because when we had those meetings, it was general, like, this is what's happened in other places, this is what we could do, this is how legally, how you have to go by it. And a lot of people were like, okay, well, what would it look like for us? So then we moved on to this step, which makes it much more clear of, like, what does it look like? And so now at this point, we're here presenting it to you guys, and then the next step is to take the bigger picture, the more detailed picture, to people and say, this is what it looks like. We did have some people who said, well, if you were going to do it, I would rather you do a bid than a voluntary. And so, but they didn't really understand what the picture looked like. So that's, that was the next question. What does it really look like?
We did do some counting from the public meetings that we had, and we had about 20, 25 property owners show up. So in a very small district like that, that's significant. About 15 of them had an open mind toward this and were leaning to favor it. And when you add those to the leadership task force members that we have, it's close to, it's a little over 40, 45% right out of the gate.
55.
I'm sorry?
55.
Growing every minute. So about 55% right out of the gate. There were 5 or 6 that were leaning opposed, and together they were about 12%. 8. So 55 to 8 is the initial scorecard coming out of the gate. That doesn't mean that by the time this comes to council, that it'll be one happy family. And our experience in working on business improvement districts throughout the state, throughout the country, is there will always be some who don't like the idea of an assessment, or the mandatory nature of it does not sit well with some. However, rarely have we seen a small district with odds for success right out of the gate like this one. And particularly given what you guys have been through, you have been through a tough time. So coming out of that tough time and then sort of having these sort of initial indicators of success, we are optimistic for you.
Okay, and just one final thought. So with a business district versus the voluntary, I would have to somewhat agree with that. I have a sister that owns a very successful shop on Old South Gaylord Street. And I know that that's similar to how they feel, that there's a few people that pay their dues and, work towards the marketing and the fairs and the carolers and the lights on that street. And there's some that just benefit from the others' dues and work and that kind of stuff. So I could see the bid being a better, kind of a more fair situation. And I guess it is nice to set it aside from the street, because it's truly not about the street as much as the businesses and working on that corridor and making it a successful corridor. Similar to, like, again, I hate to say Old South Gaylord, but you do hear even advertising for that on the radio. When they said, oh, you're tired of going downtown, come here. You hear that on the radio waves right now. So,
Well, Brad, you gave a pretty thorough discussion, but are there any other questions? Mr. DiTullio?
The only question I had on the process is, can the process be reversed that the property owners vote first, then council approves it? Or does council have to approve it first?
The, well, the process allows the property owners essentially to vote twice. So the first vote is the petition. Property owners must sign petitions before council can consider it. So there's no vote at council unless property owners deliver petitions. And then secondly, council would vote, and then lastly would be the Tabor election.
What percentage of the property owners do you need to have that petition be valid?
The petition needs to represent a majority by acreage and value, so it is weighted by acreage and value. Those who have more acreage and more value have more weight on their petition. However, we would encourage this district, as we do all of our districts, to bring in as many petitions as they can.
So how does that, is that a formula you have, that this property owner is 10% of the acreage?
Exactly.
And that formula is regulated, right?
Yeah, it's based upon the square footage of the land and the value. One thing that is, I think a strong point about this section of West 38th, there is no dominant property owner in this proposed district. The bicycle store is pretty much the largest owner, and they account maybe for 7 or 8% alone. So we sometimes work in districts where there's a very large owner who has more weight maybe than they should. Not the case here. We got a lot of small, independent owners and businesses.
Mr. Urban?
Thank you. I guess the predominant landowner on this strip would be Jefferson County Schools. So, because it's not a commercial property, therefore, they wouldn't be involved in this process.
That's correct. Not tax exempt entities and residential are exempt from this. So there's a large church. There's Jeffco schools, Family Tree. Are shown on the map as being included, but they would not be assessed. Certainly, they could voluntarily participate, and they would be encouraged to do so.
So that's why you drop from the 60 so odd lots down to the 44 is based on that, weeding out of those that don't necessarily apply to the criteria?
It was more the determination that Marshall was probably as far east as we should march, because once you get past Marshall, it gets heavily residential.
Okay.
Zach, I think what it is that some of these properties have the same owner also.
Okay.
So that's,
Based on my understanding is that there was an initial feasibility and formation study that was completed. How many of the 44 property owners were contacted for that study?
Approximately half.
Okay, so my question is, why wouldn't you contact all the property owners ahead of that? Why would you only contact half?
That is always our goal. However, you've got some that are absentee owners that live in other places. We also talk to a lot of businesses. So a lot of these business tenants who don't own their property can inform their owners as well.
Because I think that's a pretty big divide when you talk to a business owner versus a landlord. Landlord's going to have a whole different perspective on an assessment than a tenant's going to say, sure, bring it on, let's do it. But the landowner might have a whole different story.
Yeah. Although a lot of tenants will pay for this through their lease.
Just to clarify, we did mail all of the property owners and business owners about the meetings, and so they were notified.
At the property address or the owner's property address?
At the owner's property address. So that occurred, and just by my count, we have heard from, interacted with 32 parcels.
Okay.
Out of 44.
But again, what percentage of the land or value is that then as well? Because that I guess is the larger issue.
I can tell you.
It's probably 80%, I would guess.
It's about 85%.
Okay. I guess my main concern is that it looks like there's a process that's been in place to contact primarily those that are residing or conducting business on 38th rather than necessarily the property owners themselves, or a combination of both, that I would like to see that we do something to overtly encourage their participation so they know exactly what's going on prior to all this being done. Because the property owners themselves are the ones that are ultimately the most affected by these decisions.
The petition process will be very involved with the property owners.
Okay.
Regarding that, let's say you do the petition and these people just don't respond. I mean, what happens then?
You
Because
still
they didn't
have to have a
respond-
majority of both value and acreage represented.
Because if they didn't respond before, I'm just wondering what would happen if they didn't
Yeah, a
respond.
no response essentially is a no, because in the petition process, you do need to meet these thresholds.
So,
George, Mr. Pond.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments and some questions. First of all, I think it should be Bidge at 38. Bidge at 38. Okay. So I'm trying to get my head around a couple of things in no particular order. I'm just going to go down what I've got here. You say commercial properties along 38th. And I just want to make sure I understand what the distinction is between commercial properties in a mixed-use zoning overlay. So obviously you're not looking at things that are zoned C1, right? Because they're not zoned that any longer. So I just want to make sure I understand the definition of commercial.
The zoning has no bearing on the assessment.
Okay.
It's how the assessor classifies the property for taxes.
Okay.
So if the assessor classifies it as commercial, it's in. If the assessor classifies it as residential or exempt, it's out.
So if, for instance, there is something that's not currently classified as commercial inside of the district, but becomes a business in the future, they will become assessed through that process. Okay.
That's the same, like let's say if the church sold their property and then they made it into a store or whatever, then they are no longer exempt.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Under the menu of items, the kind of the physical improvements, and I'm trying to understand a little bit what it means to be a subdivision of the state. And what that relationship, what form of relationship then occurs between the bid and the city, such that obviously some of these things, like bike amenities, public art, additional signage and light banners, have either restrictions specifically through the city code or design standards, etc., and or are things that the city council is initiating action on. And so what does that relationship look like? Because in one sense it looks like there's independence that is afforded the bid through this kind of subdivision of the state, yet obviously I would assume they can't just kind of go hang anything they want on the banners as an example, which they can't, and understand how that works.
Really good question. And the reason it really is considered a subdivision of the state is because of the statutory organization. So it is a creature of state statute. However, it resides within the city of Wheat Ridge and has to obviously abide by rules, regulations, codes that would take precedence because that's the venue in which this entity is being created.
Okay. And I would assume that's the same situation then as for advocacy. Obviously, we would want to create a strong partnership with this group, but at the end of the day, it's city action that will kind of conduct some of the business on the street, if not all of it, as it relates to the physical facilities and other things.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So going to the fee assessment, it's interesting. I mean, I get it; it's pretty straightforward. But obviously, there's some, even in your examples, where they happen to have a lot of land area and or building area, but they may or may not be benefiting specifically to the people coming to the street, like the construction company. And I suppose that's just the price of doing business on the street, right? Because it's kind of an equal measure to assess against people, even if in some ways they wouldn't be benefiting in the same manner.
Right. the way I look at this is people don't walk into Compass Construction and order a pop top off a menu or try on some carpet for their basement, or, buy flowers. But what we do gain from it, and we wouldn't necessarily be putting out our happy hour marketing or anything like that, but what we do gain from that is name and brand recognition. And a wonderful example of that is I had lunch at C Plus today and with my husband, and he had just met with somebody that morning there in the Berkeley area to do some work on their house. We were on a list of 4 contractors that they were going to contact, that they had made their list on Friday. On Saturday, they then went to C Plus to go have St. Patrick's Day fun and saw our building across the street. And so then there's brand recognition and it reinforces it. So that's where we don't necessarily directly, we aren't directly involved, but we are indirectly involved, and it's one of those things where supporting those kinds of businesses then draw people into the neighborhood, which then supports our type of business.
Good. Last, I think, is the bid governance on page 3 talks about the recommendation for a 5 to 7 member board. So the formation of the board, and I might back up just a second. I mean, the actual charter, how does the charter get established and set that number, first of all, and who does that exactly? But then, obviously, how do you populate that board, and how does is it a vote amongst the 37 business owners, or how does that work?
The board is initially because this is an entity by which the work program and budget will be set annually by the board that is not yet decided upon at the time of the petition drive. It's a little bit convoluted, but what happens is the petition itself requires that 3 property owners from the prospective district are sort of sanctioned to make decisions on behalf of the district before the district is actually formed. And that is, we anticipate that will be from this group of steering committee property owners who have been working on this effort for the last several months. And then the board composition will become clear through the petition drive as folks determine their willingness and interest in participating on the board. We have designated certain sectors. We want an auto-related use. We want other kinds of uses so that there's diverse representation of business and property owners. And we are not suggesting an election because of the political nature of that, and rather the slate be selected through the petition process, through the steering committee, and with general consensus of the petition signers, and that initial slate would be part of the ordinance that you all approve, hopefully, this summer.
One thing that we did talk about to make sure that this was an inclusive process was to also put out sheets of, would you be interested in being on the board, or would you like to recommend somebody to be on the board? And then, like she said in the work, we want to make sure that we have one person at least from each of the different uses along the corridor. So then people would have an opportunity to put out their vote or their say if they think their neighbor Johnny should be on the board.
So thank you for your work, Denise and Jerry, and we'll have a conversation, but I definitely support continuing to move forward with the rigor that seems like you've already put to it.
Mr. Starker?
Who is financing the cost of going through the elections and the process?
I can take that one. In last year, in the 2013 budget, we asked for $20,000 to conduct the first phase of the Business Improvement District. For the second phase, we requested an additional 10. So that is being funded through the City of Wheat Ridge budgeted dollars. And then any additional costs can be raised in a couple of ways. Somebody like Wheat Ridge 2020 or like the property owners themselves can make a loan to the bid that can be part of the initial budget, that can be paid back, those legal costs and things as part of the initial bid budget.
Mr. Urban?
Yeah, thank you. This question may be for Jerry. Can the city then craft ordinances which guide what the bid can and cannot do as a bid operating within the city of Wheat Ridge, sort of a parental ordinance that says, you guys can do this, this, and this, but you can't do this, this, and this?
Mr. Dahl?
I don't have the bid statute with me, and it's been a long time since I've had to really go through it in detail. But because the city council is the one creating the bid by ordinance, I believe that you can establish, those kinds of restrictions. I expect that you'll be responsive to the petition. So to some extent, there's a little bit of a interplay. If the petition says, here's what, and I'm happy to be corrected, but here's our structure that we would like to have. If all you're doing is approving that petition, then you're approving, that structure. But because you've got the power to decide whether that petition's approved or not, I think you could probably, and I'm happy to be corrected, approve it with conditions. And some of those could be, whatever you like, I suppose, with respect to the governing body, the assessments, et cetera. I would expect that they'll probably bring to you a fairly fully fleshed out, approach. Does that match up with what
you may or may
guys are
not
used to doing?
have that authority? We would probably want to probe that further. It would be unprecedented. We don't know of any municipal government in Colorado that has accepted bid petitions and then essentially created new parameters or restrictions that were not anticipated beforehand. So to the extent that there were some additional policies or incentives or whatever you want to call it that the city would like to see the bid do, it'd be better that we know out of the gate so they could be incorporated into the plan and the petition.
Madam Mayor, I guess then, one of my thoughts in this is if there's some kind of city match to help fund the organization, that there then be some sort of reporting on an annual basis back to the city, the reporting requirements. But then just the independent nature of the district away from the city concerns me somewhat, and I want to be able to create something that puts some checks and balances in there so they don't go off and do something.
One point I think I would make is that, besides just the creation document, there's the proposed agreement on services that is proposed, and that's an IGA. Councilmember Pond asked about, well, what's the relationship? And you heard the answer, and I agree. This is a statutorily created entity. Special districts are too, when you think about it. We've got a bunch of special districts in the city, water, sewer districts. They have to come to us for permits for anything they do because they're a regulated entity. They're not exempt. We also have IGAs with other districts, a lot of IGAs on fire, on emergency services, et cetera. So it's through the mechanism of that agreement, to just put it out here, to be blunt, you can withhold your approval for that agreement until it contains the kinds of things that are important to you. It's largely dedicated toward how the services are delivered, as I understand it. But, that's another pretty direct way to have impact because it's an IGA that takes two parties to agree to.
Just one question that we do really have tonight is, the work program that's before you. If there's something that you have heartburn about or concerns about the bid being a participant in, that's something that we'd like to know and bring that feedback because some of our next steps are going back to those property owners that we met with, the property and business owners, and talking this through. So we'd love that input.
It says also in here that the city council can dissolve the bid if we don't report. We have to report each year with a budget, correct? With a budget, and if we don't do our reporting for 2 years, then you guys can dissolve the bid.
And may I add one point to that, just for clarification, in terms of process? The statute does lay out the requirement that the bid make an annual report to the city council.
Okay. Then my final question is, with respect to the size of the business improvement district, with 44 property owners or what have you, what's the smallest number of property owners that you've seen a successful bid operate under? Is this on the lower end, on the higher end? What's the number?
This is on the smaller end. I certainly wouldn't want to recommend it be any smaller or raise any less money. Year and a half ago, we did form one at Federal and 25th that had a smaller number of property owners and about a $50,000 annual budget. But we do think that there needs to be, if this is going to have an impact and if this is really going to help the corridor, that it does need to have a certain size, it does need to have a certain budget, and we certainly think we have those we're beyond those minimum thresholds on this one.
What are those minimum thresholds?
It varies from district to district. Old South Gaylord, for example, does have a bid, but it focuses mostly on maintenance. I think they raise $20,000 or $30,000 a year. So for that purpose of maintenance, it's sufficient, but they need extra money to do the events and the activation. So this would be in the lower third of bids in Colorado in terms of size and budget. But we do think it's adequately capitalized, and actually with consideration of a full or partial city match of the funds, that their budget would actually be I wouldn't necessarily say robust, but it would be ample.
Genevieve.
As you have obviously interviewed a lot of businesses and done this in several communities, as you analyzed and looked at our community here, can you tell me what makes you think it would be successful and the things that you saw that were positive as to why you think this is a good thing?
Yeah. Well, and I'll be honest with you, when we got started, which was in November, right after your election, we had our doubts. We had our doubts whether this could work in Wheat Ridge. Part of it because of the sort of leftover acrimony from the battle over the street. But here's some of the things that we see. We do see a district in transition. There's a lot of new businesses coming into West 38th, and there's a lot of new blood. And frankly, when we're looking at feasibility for an improvement district, what we're looking for first and foremost are champions. Private property and business owner champions that really believe in the district. They understand what's going on. They're willing to invest in something like this to move it to the next level. And whether folks are for or against this, virtually all the businesses that you have there have been there. They're either new or they've been there for a while. They're all passionate. They're all passionate about the district. And if you take the controversy of the road, which we're not supposed to talk about, but if you take the controversy of the road out of the equation, everybody wants the district to succeed. So I don't want to sound Pollyanna here, but that's really a big part of what we look for. Are there property and business owner champions that are going to carry this? Because this is not a city-led initiative. If the city gets too far in front of it, it can be real problematic down the road. But if you do have a group of property and business owners that are looking forward, they're looking to the future, and there's some new blood out there, that's what we look for, and that's what we see on West 38th.
And also, let's say this was successful, what are some things that we as a city could see as a result of a successful business district?
Well, hopefully you should see both visible changes physically. That's the most tangible. So again, I go back to West Colfax, which was pretty beat up a few years ago. And the bid has been part of that transformative change in terms of the physical nature of it. The other thing we should see, and I would suspect that's what our property owner champions at the table are in it for tonight. In fact, they should really answer this question, but I suspect they're in it because they see the added value of improving the cachet of the district in terms of sales, in terms of property value, in terms of really a district that they can be more and more proud of as it moves on.
Right there is being proud. And, again, before we did the remodel on the front of the building, we were at the point, well, we've either got to leave town, move, go somewhere else because it was getting too run down. People are not going to want to come to 38th Avenue to shop at our store. So we decided to invest, stay here, so we're in it for the long haul. But again, I'm in the same boat as Janice. We really don't rely on, we're not a restaurant or anything like that. I just want my store in an area that people are proud to say they came to Wheat Ridge and bought here. They want to go to a nice area, and that's bottom line for me. That's it.
Let me ask, Brad, so I assume that if you go through the petition process and you've got enough signatures and you bring it to council and we create an ordinance, at that time, council also decides whether to make the matching funds to meet what you will be raising. That would be part of our job at that time.
The commitment should be in place at that time.
Okay.
And then the actual.
Then you go for a vote.
Then you go for the vote, and then provided it passes the vote, then the commitment would be solid.
And I think it would be helpful during the petition process to get some sense of if there's support today for matching funds. The city's been funding Wheat Ridge 2020 to provide numerous services, and a good chunk of that is for 38th Avenue marketing and events and things in potentially that are in this work program. So I would anticipate that the funds that we're currently giving to 2020 today, a portion of them could be diverted and given to the bid. So it wouldn't necessarily be increased expenditure on the city. It'd just be a diversion of what we're already giving 2020, potentially. That's a way to do it. But I think they would like to have a sense if there's.
Yeah. So I do need a sense of support or not. And I think what I'm going to ask for is if there is not support, if you'd raise your hand so that I know if I need to take an actual count or not. Generally, my feeling of the room is that we have support, but is this something we do want to, if we do not want to support it, please raise your hand or so speak. And a hush fell. Okay, Mr. Urban?
I guess it's something that the property owners are really the ones that this is going to impact, and I'm not sure the wisdom behind not allowing matching funds to be allowed for an association as opposed to a business improvement district. It seems as though the city of Arvada funds the Arvada Historical Association in Old Town Arvada that basically operates as sort of a business association for them. It's a 501c6, I think. Why wouldn't we be able to do an association here as well and allow the city to match either a business improvement district and or an association? Why can we only match a business improvement district?
I don't have an answer for that, but I don't know that that's what we're looking to. That's the question for us right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I clearly understand.
Yeah.
I mean, there hasn't been a discussion about an association. Could you maybe clarify what?
Well, I guess the memo and the feasibility study talked about two organizational options. One is an association and one is a business improvement district. We've sort of whittled that down without any discussion to the business improvement district. An association is still a viable option that property owners could go about doing themselves, but when we put it out there that says that and we say, well, a match is only available if you go in this direction, you're not really giving the business owners the chance to choose an association. Why wouldn't we provide a match to an association? Why would we only provide a match to a district?
I'm not sure if we said a match would only be to a bid, but I think the recommendation from the leadership committee in Puma was that the bid probably makes more sense. If you guys want to have a more detailed discussion about that, we can, but.
The recommendation's actually for both, as you read it, is to have a business improvement district. That's the main thing that's going to raise the funds that you'd be looking to match, and then also have a voluntary option as part of that organization. So
To join the bid.
you could associate and be a voluntary association. So, and that was the feedback from our property and business owner meetings, was to do both.
I mean, it says right here under voluntary business association, no city match. So you're picking the winner for the owners, it seems like.
Well, I think after the petition process, it'll come back to us in whichever way that petition process has brought forward. I don't know Would that be accurate?
I just want to affirm what what Mr. Urban is saying, which is that on the organizational option chart that we provided, the Business Improvement District had talked about a match, and in discussion with city staff, we understood that there was interest in match. And Voluntary Association, we had not heard the same, but I don't know that it was precluded. So if that's something you're also interested in saying, we'd be willing to match on the association side of things as well. We'd certainly love to hear that.
I guess that's my concern, is that when you present the business owners with, do you want the city to give you money to improve your business area, they're going to say yes. But if you need to give them a couple of different options. You can do a business improvement district, or you can do a voluntary business association, but the city will consider matching either alternative that the group of business owners choose their own path.
Well, we kind of talked about that quite extensively in a lot of different meetings, and we found out that, again, and going back to what Janice said earlier, is you're going to have, 10% of the people doing 90% of the work, and then it goes down from there. And the same thing is going to be for a match. So let's say we have, business A, B, and C want to be on. E does not. F, G, and H does. So again, they're getting the benefits of the voluntary association without any of the capital, without any of the work. So we felt it would be a little bit. If you're in the district, you're in. You're either in or out, I guess, is bottom line.
I think kind of what we heard too is that the city doesn't necessarily want to just give us money for some of the businesses that are putting in. So only some of the businesses they're putting in would get matched, and if it wasn't that the majority of the people were willing to invest into the corridor, then the city didn't necessarily want to give us money if there's not the majority of people that want to invest in the corridor.
But that's what we're currently doing through Wheatridge 2020, though.
We are currently getting money for a voluntary association. That's correct.
Yeah, so I don't, and we all talk about how great everything's going, so how is that any different? Why don't we just move forward the way that it
It
is?
seemed like they didn't want to add another thing on the budget that's a voluntary association.
Mr. Starker?
But I guess, as I understand it, it's to go out for a petition to form a business improvement district. It's not a petition to form either A or B. So I think the proposal before us is to go and see if there's support for a business improvement district.
But we're sort of limiting the business owner's options by saying, go with a business improvement district or nothing. It's saying.
No, I would respectfully disagree, because I think if it comes back that the business owners don't want to form a business improvement district, then there could be another vote to form a voluntary association.
And I think in that circumstance, the city should consider matching either one of those options, whatever the business owners choose, as we currently do through Wheatridge 2020.
Mr. Pond?
I do think it's a distinct thing. We're talking about the bid, and if the petition was to fail, or if it was to come back in a substantially different format, then obviously we would have another discussion. We can have that at that time. I can just personally say that I would reserve my feelings for money to a voluntary association. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it, but I certainly like the notion of the structure of this one more so. But again, I think that discussion would really only take place once we got past or stalled out in a petition effort.
Joyce, can I just ask a quick question on the matching?
Yeah, Ms. Davis.
And I know, so is the matching set, or is that something that's decided every year?
Every year.
Every year it's decided. So like one year we might say we'll match 100%. The next year we might say, ooh, we're doing these other programs and we'll match 50% and that type of thing.
Well, my understanding is that city council cannot commit itself beyond the current year, and
Okay.
you can't commit the next councils and
All
so
right.
forth. But we'd like to know, as we're moving forward, is there that general sense of support?
I think that's the question, and it appears that we do have that general sense of support. Is that correct? Yep, looks good.
One more thing, Madam Mayor.
Joyce, did you ask for consensus on whether or not we would match, would be agreeable to matching?
That's a good question. So what we've consented to is that we will support the petition process, and now the question is the council willing to match whatever the bid or voluntary organization, whatever they come back with, are we willing to match it with funds? And I don't know if a number is, at this point, we're looking at $62,000. So a match in some form, how's that? We have a consensus in that direction. And we do? Okay. Is there anybody objecting? No. So we will be matching in some form.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to clarify, when you said a consensus to, no, a consensus to support the petition process, does that give us the direction to be able to coordinate with the city attorney and the city clerk on the petition and election process?
I'm sure it does, yes, unless we have an objection here. Doesn't matter. Looks like we're good.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for council for vetting that out quite thoroughly. We need a break here. Apparently, Mr. Stark. proposed amendment on the subdivision regulations, and let me say, staff, you did a fabulous job of a lot of thick material, and you condensed it well and explained what we were trying to say. As a matter of fact, a brief conversation with Ken beforehand is, after reading through a lot of this, are there questions on specific areas, or is the council contented enough with it all that we can go ahead and approve these changes, or would you like to go over them individually? And Mr. DiTullio has a question.
Now, Ken, would you mind just explaining to the council what you and I had talked about the least restrictive environment? Where do you think this falls into that? Because I support the least restrictive environment. So if this does that.
Yes, we think it does. I think since, back to really 2005 when the neighborhood revitalization strategy was commissioned and approved by council, that had some pretty aggressive recommendations for the city in terms of, at that time, the language was creating a predictable and a streamlined regulatory environment. And, we've spent a lot of time in my department over the last, 5 to 10 years trying to implement that and create a regulatory environment that supports good development and makes it relatively easy to get things done that the city has said that they want to see done, and to make it predictable in terms of being consistent from project to project. Former mayor, now council member DiTullio, coined the phrase least restrictive environment, which really kind of embraces those themes as well, and they continue to really guide a lot of the work that we do. So that is certainly the driving factor in our approach to this regulation, the subdivision article of the zoning code, as well as past changes that we've made to the zoning code. The existing code is very much, the existing subdivision regulations are really drafted to a large extent for a community that is building out, that's growing, that's looking at new development, and it doesn't work super well right now, both in terms of process and both in terms of substance, for what we really do, which is redevelopment and infill development. Small, just little quirky subdivision applications that don't fit into that more traditional model well. So we've had this on our list of things to do for a number of years, and frankly, late last year and the first part of this year was the first time that we've just been able to find the resources to do it. And I just commend Lauren when I say we've had enough resources. She was chiefly that resource. And we're able to just do the hard work of doing best practice research across the metro area, and then aligning that into the regulatory environment that we want to create here. So we feel good about where we're at. We certainly welcome any input you have. We're prepared to go through this in kind of a line-by-line manner. We've given you a series of questions, but basically we've tried to give you what we think is the best direction. And if, as Mayor Jay says, if you're kind of okay that you've read through the packet and feel comfortable with the direction that we're heading, or if you have questions on specific items, we'd be glad to talk more substantively about that. But if there's overall consensus, you've already taken the time to read a long memo, and perhaps the ordinance that accompanies it, so we don't need to double down on that with the discussion here if that's not the direction.
Councilman DiTullio.
So basically, the next step is you to bring forth an ordinance which makes these changes. So
we have a tentative dates
Right.
for both the first reading and public hearing. Public hearing would be the 28th of April.
Okay, so based on what I've read a couple of times, I support moving forward with this. And I don't know if anybody else has any questions, but if and when there's a consensus, I'll make it to move forward with it because I've read it and I think it's a good changes for the community.
Do we have, Mr. Starker?
I think it's a good proposal, and I thank you for being sort of as clear as you can under the circumstances. Let me put it that way. I had just a couple of questions and sort of in some of the terminology, and just to go back, there was one sentence you say the proposed review scheme is more conservative than several other communities in the metropolitan area that depend upon administrative review. I'm on page 3, the top of page 3
of the memo.
And I didn't know if, I guess that's, to me, it looked like a reasonable balance.
Yeah, essentially that's in terms of the process, in terms of which subdivisions are subject to public hearings and which are administrative, essentially, and some in between with the Planning Commission. So I think, Lauren, add to this as you see fit, but essentially we're not trying to make the process so administrative that we're on that total end of the spectrum. So it still is fairly, as we're saying there, conservative relative to the Denver metro area.
Okay. And then I had sort of a particular question on page 7, down in the table, under multifamily residential and commercial, applicants are required to construct improvements or pay a fee in lieu of. And then down below on single-family residential, they may choose to build or pay a fee in lieu of. And is that just sort of different language?
I think that was an intentional distinction. Most commercial or multifamily development is going to happen on a collector or an arterial road that we know we want to see an improved streetscape on in the near future. Most single and two-family projects are happening on local roads, and so in some cases we get folks who don't want to pay the fee because they don't reap the benefit of that improvement, and so we were more comfortable with giving the option for single or two-family.
That's great. And then if I can take one more minute, down at the bottom of the page, we talk about curb gutter and a 5-foot attached sidewalk, and that's our city standard?
For a local street.
Okay. Have we gone away from the little 3-foot California, what do they call it, California curb?
We have.
We have.
Yep.
So.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Yep.
I think that's a great idea. And that, with my thanks, concludes my questions.
And just to answer a question that you didn't ask, I guess, but we are trying to be kind of reasonable in that fee structure. So that's why we're not, we're proposing that curb gutter and 5-foot attached sidewalk, which a lot of the corridors, the actual what we'd want to see there would be greater in terms of a tree lawn, in terms of on some streets having a wider sidewalk. So I think, we're trying to not overcharge by doing that fee. It's basically the minimum that we think would ever be installed.
Mr. Fitzgerald.
Are we going to proceed like this, or are we going to go through each question? Lauren had lined out questions. If not, I have some things I'll just start with right now.
What we had discussed was that if everybody's read the pack and they're pretty comfortable with it, we'll go forward, but we're going to start, and so we don't have to go through every section.
Yeah,
but if
great.
you have questions, please bring them up now.
Okay, on page 6, just a quibble. In the multipliers chart, the word transit is defined as a conveyance of passengers from one place to another. That could include buses. And so if you have a half a mile, since we have buses on all of our major east-west streets, a half mile from each of those streets, in essence, covers the entire city, or almost the entire city.
And when at a staff level, we realized we needed to define transit, so there is that definition section in the subdivision regulations, so we need to add a definition for transit station as it applies to the parkland dedication. So it could be either just the TOD area, or it could be, a major park and ride, or we talked about the bus station, transfer station over on Youngfield, but finding those cutoffs so that it doesn't apply to everything.
Yeah. Okay, good. On page 7, and I don't think you were proposing any changes here, but I just, the thing that applies to a single or two-family residential upgrade is that if it includes 50% or more of the space or square footage of the unit, then the fees apply. But if it's 49% or less, it doesn't. It seems like that's a big jump that suddenly encourages people not to make major improvements. For example, a pop top or a scrape. I'm just not sure. I'd like to see some sort of easing there so there's not this giant dam that people have to climb over if they decide to do something big. In a previous council meeting, we talked about the need to improve our housing, our older housing, and I don't want to make it hard to do that. So I'd like to find some way so that if you don't have to suddenly pay the fee if you reach 50%.
I'm sorry.
Get some discussion on that maybe.
Yeah.
That'd be helpful.
Is there other thoughts about that?
That is current, you are correct, that's current code.
Do we understand
so
it?
we're not recommending a change today, but if,
So, go ahead, Mr. DiTullio.
I'd be okay of reducing that amount because you do want to encourage redevelopment, and we even talked about eliminating or reducing building permit fees at one time over a certain amount of time. So if we can save some money, save the property owner some cash on that, I'd be okay with reducing that or eliminating it.
But would you be looking then maybe to increase from 50% to 60% the valuation to make it higher so that truly a really large project would then want to improve the public rights of way or something like that?
I don't know. I thought about this and I really can't think of a good answer, but I was thinking of a sliding scale, a fee in lieu of, and there would be a sliding scale that would start. And at some point, and maybe 50% is the right point, they'd have to pay the entire fee or put in the required changes. But I'd like to see some kind of a sliding scale so there is not a huge step right at 50%.
Ken and Lauren, during your research, is this something you probably didn't research on this, but do you know if this is comparable or what other
If there's
cities do?
consensus that as an approach would make sense, I think we could come back with some sort of a sliding scale. I mean, as simple as at 50%, it's 50% of what the fee would have been, and at 51%, or maybe there's groups like from 50 to 75%, the fee shall be 50%, above 75% improvement, it's 100% of the fee.
But the only problem with that is that if someone's going to make the improvements, would you put in half of the sidewalk because
City
you
would have to pay
got
those.
there? Or, I mean, it works good if you're doing a fee in lieu of, but if you're going to actually do the work, it becomes a little more complicated, it seems to me.
I'm okay with 50% being the place in which you have to do the whole thing.
That's the way it is today.
Yeah, but if we just had a sliding scale up to there.
There's zero up to that.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, so
But I don't want to discourage somebody from doing a larger than 50% improvement.
All right.
well, if they do a smaller than 50%, they wouldn't need to make any improvements or pay any fees in lieu of.
Correct.
But once they got to 50% and larger, they would need to make those improvements.
And I think Tim's point is maybe they'll stop at 49% of the improvements floor ratio, 49% of the floor ratio. It's like, then I don't have to pay for any improvements. So he don't want to discourage anybody from going to 60 or 70%.
Right, that's the point.
Well,
Mr. DiTullio.
Bud had mentioned, increasing the percentage. Would that make more sense to leave the scales where they are and say, okay, it's going to be 65% or 70% when they change? Does that make any sense based on what?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was, suggesting, is that once you get to that 50, then you...
Well, so yeah, the comment was, could we bump up that 50 to 60% or 65% or some number?
Or do a sliding.
Right, it's all or nothing, but it's more.
But at a larger increment.
You could do more.
75 or something, or 70 or 60.
60 seems to be.
Just remember that if the improvements are going to get made, somebody else has to pay for that difference then, and that's probably us, so.
Yeah.
But I understand what your point, you're encouraging
Would 60 work?
redevelopment.
I think 60 is all right with me.
So at 60%, it's the full requirement.
That's right.
Is that?
Are we good there?
It's still a big step.
Yeah.
Do we need staff to look at this any further or check some comparables or?
That's okay.
I think that's good direction.
Ray seems
All right.
good with 60.
We're good? I'm
one
sorry,
other-
Mr. Starker.
One other question that sort of got by me, with your permission, on page 6. It was question number 3, and we're talking about where parkland dedication comes into commercial subdivisions, and you asked the question, should the code be revised such that parkland dedication applies to commercial developments as well? And when I think of commercial developments, I generally think, retail predominantly, or retail and office, I guess, or retail industrial, or those are the kind of developments that we're talking about.
Yes.
And do we currently have a parkland dedication for commercial property?
We don't, but in our research, it's clear that it's not uncommon for communities to have a commercial parkland dedication fee, with the logic being, as Lauren explained, that, those folks use parks too. You go to a park at lunch and have, or it's typically probably considered a lesser impact, but we at least wanted to, based on our research, ask the question.
Yeah, and I guess my feeling is that to me seems to be sort of a barrier of entry for commercial development in our city, and I'm a little hesitant to move in that direction.
Mr. Pond.
I was gonna ask about that as well, just to kind of confirm your research on it in terms of, I guess, expanding upon or perhaps answering Mr. Starker's kind of guess that would be a barrier for entry. So if you're seeing this in a lot of communities,
I don't think it's widespread. So there's three typical exactions associated with parkland. There's the dedication of land or fee in lieu, which we have. There's the development fee, which a lot of communities assess, so not just give us the land, but help us put a playground on it. And then there's the assessment on commercial property. So they, certainly the type that we have is the most common. The parkland development is sort of the middle, and the commercial assessment is the least common, but it's out there, and we wanted to ask that question. Since we don't have a ton of new residential development, is it worth looking at another source as well?
yeah, well, I mean, I guess I'll say, I'm not opposed to this if, in fact, it doesn't really create a significant barrier, because I do think in the reduction of the density multipliers, and I mean, this is a way, I think, if I'm reading this properly, this is a way for us to still capture through kind of improvements to the city, and obviously more commerce and more traffic through the city, for us to make sure that we're maintaining our park infrastructure. So, I mean, from that standpoint, I support it, but I think Mr. Starker's question is still valid.
Mr. DiTullio.
Does anybody have an issue if I make a consensus to move it forward? I make a consensus to move this forward to the next available meeting, and then add the 60% for the cutoff to where we can actually start charging for other.
What about this question? Do we?
In regard to this question, are you contented with moving it forward the way it is set right now?
How does everyone feel about charging this on commercial property?
I think Stephanie's here sort of the end of that discussion, so they know whether it's in or out before you move it forward.
I'm okay with leaving it in for now.
We've never had a commercial parkland dedication, so it'd be new code language that you haven't read, that I've never written, but we can write it if you recommend
It's
it.
only a question, it's not
It's
written
not
as a
in-
proposal
right.
right now.
Yeah.
So if we move it forward, it will not be in there, and I hear a couple people saying maybe it shouldn't be, but you just need to kind of put a bow on that discussion.
Oh, so the default is that it would not be levied on.
Correct.
It's not there now. The staff was just asking, should we be writing this in?
So there's a consensus to move forward without putting
Without it, I think that's
Yeah,
fine.
my consensus would be without it and the 60%.
Okay.
I think that's fine.
All right, are we good on a consensus to move without that commercial portion in there, as well as the 60% cutoff as far as the other fee?
Before we do that, Lauren and Ken, are there any other questions like that need to be
Right.
That was the only one I had.
the only major one? Okay.
Great work on it, Lauren, very good.
Thanks for reading it all.
Okay, I think they're good.
Okay,
Consensus.
we're good on that one.
Did you get consensus? Yep.
Like, we got consensus.
Okay.
That was mine.
All right, last, not quite last.
Thanks, Ken and Lauren.
Thanks, Ken and Lauren, very much.
Mikulak. Mikulak. It's a hard name. Mikulak.
Everybody has to say Lauren's last name. Okay. Vicon. Moving on to our item number 4, videotaping council study sessions. I'm one of the, go ahead, Christy.
So, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to introduce this. I guess one of the things I want to clarify, as I've heard in several of the public comments, was the question of transparency. And I don't think the intent of this was to change the transparency of this meeting or the information to our constituents. I think the issue came up, or the question came up, and I've been asked by several people that I think it was probably 6 months ago or so that we changed the study sessions from audio tape to videotape. And I think what I recollect, and again, it just could be my recollection and not maybe what really was in the minutes or what was decided, was that we would try it for some time, come back, see how it worked, see if we liked it, see if we'd continue. So I think that's kind of the basis of this, but I do want to make sure to emphasize that it's not about excluding information from the constituents. It's still about having it, it would still be taped if it wasn't videotaped, but kind of talking about, so, where we were, the changes we made. Do we like them? Is it worth the changes in the dollar amount? And kind of open up that discussion. Now, that being said, I did do a little bit of homework on the taping of the study sessions, and my big thing is not necessarily the money as much as the quality of the taping, which I don't know if anyone's gone and looked at study sessions, but the quality of those study sessions and the taping of them, we don't quite have the quality like we would for council, because we're sitting down here and the cameras don't quite catch it like they do up there. So that was one of my thoughts when I saw it. And the other thing I did ask Patrick for was for information on how many clicks do we actually have on those meetings. And I don't have that email with me, but I believe it was like eight clicks per meeting, 8 to 12 per meeting. It wasn't a huge amount of our constituents clicking on those tapings, but I just wanted to provide that information because as bringing it to this study session, one of our things was to do the homework or some of the backup information, so I wanted to provide that as well. But again, emphasize that it's not about the transparency, it's about going back to something that we had decided 6 months ago to always come back and revisit it, so that's kind of the point.
Mr. DiTullio?
That was I think it was Bud that made a consensus to move forward with it, and then we would review it for 6 to 8 months and then come back and look at it. I think it's been positive. I've watched them, and maybe the quality's not there, but it's better than listening to it on an audio tape. And so I think for the money, I would say keep it and move forward with it, at least for this year again, and then we could review it at budget time. But I don't think $8,000 a year, basically? Is that what it's come down to? $400 a meeting? We don't have a meeting every there's holidays in there too, so I don't think it's that big of a deal to spend the money to help inform. It gives another way of delivering the information. It's also on YouTube. So when you say 8 clicks, you talking about YouTube clicks or the city's
website?
Because I've seen them on YouTube. It's a higher number than just 8 on the YouTube videos.
And I know Jesse, that's how Jesse looks at it on YouTube.
So I'm okay with keeping them.
Mr. Fitzgerald?
I have really struggled with this. I've gone back and forth. But I think that in the climate we've had in the past of conflict and mistrust, I think if we do away with the videotaping, we're just going to give people another reason to mistrust us and be angry at us. And so I'm afraid I have to say I think we should videotape it.
Any other comments?
I don't know if it's ironic or appropriate that we're discussing this issue during Colorado Sunshine Week, but I think as much as we want to revisit the decision that we made several months ago, I think it is about transparency that videotaping and providing the video of these sessions, I think, is, whether it's one person or 300 people viewing it, it's about giving people different types of access to their elected officials. And one way is through YouTube and video of our meetings together. And I think that it is a small price to pay for that transparency. And as far as the quality of the videos, I think a lot of it deals with the distance between the mic and our voice. That's really the crux of the quality is if we as council members can commit to being closer to the mic and speaking directly to mic and into the mic and doing that, that'll help increase the quality of these study sessions. And so I think that we need to continue with it, and I would be adamantly opposed of any sort of going back to just audio, because you don't get the full effect of the meeting with just an audio representation of what's happening. So I would encourage us to continue to videotape.
We are looking at new cameras also. The cameras in here are fairly old, and we have a proposal out right now to do some improvements in here, which will include cameras. So that should help. That could help too.
Mr. Stark?
Well, and Madam Mayor, I would like to say that I, in full disclosure, appreciate our citizens watching us. I would hope that this is not an opportunity for just grandstanding, that people do get a chance to look at us and see how we deliberate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starker. Anyone else? And no?
I would be in favor of moving to audio from video, for the reason that at no time it has been my understanding that there isn't transparency. The public is welcome to attend study session. They're welcome to attend the council meetings, and they're taped. It's a cost savings. That's what it is. It's a cost savings, and I'd be in support of the audio.
Okay. Mr. Pond. Mr. Pond.
I think I fall somewhat in the middle on this, and I'll tell you, I recall sitting at this table at budget cycle last year and arguing over lesser dollar amounts than what we're talking about right now for what I would argue are more important things. So I will bring that up again when we argue about a $5,000 this and a $5,000 that. Versus the 8,000, and I think there's something to be said for the fact that we're producing essentially with no greater transparency. Because I agree, it's no greater transparency really. It's just a video versus an audio. It's still published. It's still available. It's still an open meeting. It's all of those things, and we're paying the price for it. So I agree to an extent to some of the other comments that clearly people came and talked about it and feel like it has some value. I think when we come about and start talking about values at the budget cycle, we should think about it again.
And Mr. DiTullio again.
Well, I guess I'd like to ask for a consensus that we continue at this time with our videotaping of the study sessions until we review it again during budget time, possibly. Especially if we're looking at new camera equipment.
Okay, it looks like we need to take a vote on this one on a consensus. Are you proposing a consensus that we go forward with continuing it? All right, all of those in favor of that, please raise your hand. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that we're going to continue the video taping of our council of our study session. So we are going to continue with the videotaping of our study session. That is our consensus, right?
Yes.
Good. All right.
One thing with that, I do think George has a good point, because I think there have been many of us that have challenged each other to, there are places that we could save money, and I do think that come budget cycle, it is budgeted, and I think we do need to look at it, because it's, $5,000 or whatever it might be, and it could save, You know, I mean, we do nickel and dime in some areas,
Well,
and I think that this is a challenge to all of us.
It's more like 10,000, and when you think about the areas,
I'm talking about is the difference between taping versus videoing, because we'd still have a cost with taping, I would assume. Do we have a
I mean,
cost?
the audio.
Audio, yeah.
This was an addition. Okay.
Tape that too.
Let's move on to staff reports.
Town hall meeting's coming up, March 31st. I'd like to get a little bit of maybe direction, if you'd like to give direction on what you'd like to see. What I would like to suggest, what I'm planning is that I could do a State of the City presentation. And similar to what I've been doing, I've done it several times. I'll probably do it at the council retreat also, a version of it. You'll see it, but it's just a good overview of kind of where the city has come over the last several years and some of our projects, updates on economic development projects. We could start out that way. The departments, probably each department will probably have a table in the room with just information where people could stop by and ask questions of code enforcement or the police department or Parks and Rec. So more of an open house style with that. But do you want other agenda items on a published agenda, or do you want to do a Q&A, or do you actually want to put something out there and say this is definitely what we're going to be talking about, or just do more of a Q&A type thing? People are starting to ask. The agendas that we've been sending around right now and telling people that is we're doing a State of the City address and providing updates from our city officials, and then be time for Q&A. But if you want to get more specific than that, we'd like to know so that we can prepare and get you guys prepared if you want to do the presentations and the speaking, or if you need staff to do that, we need to prepare for that.
Mr. Bond.
I assume, I'm just trying to think of the timing of this, that we will be obviously conducting some conversations about topics at the retreat that we'll want to potentially bring forward as part of that. So now, as far as I'm concerned, as those evolve, it could still be part of the State of the City address, perhaps, or some kind of just elected officials update or something like that. So I don't know that we have to be specific, because obviously until we start to hash out some of those conversations, we may not be able to be. But I do think we have an opportunity to bring forward some of the conversation that we have at the retreat to that meeting.
Right. And Mr. DiTullio.
I've been meeting with some citizens, unofficially or officially, and I'll be doing that more next week. But what I've heard is that they would like to see a portion where it's this Q&A, maybe 20 minutes at the meeting, so that they could ask questions of council or staff. And I mean, this isn't a setup. I mean, they just want to be able to ask questions about anything besides that's not on the agenda. So I think that it'd be good to specify a certain amount of time within that retreat that's going to be allocated towards Q&A from the public. So that'd be my suggestion.
And Ms. Davis?
So I did my survey this weekend. Would we have those survey results for this meeting? Would we have those finished?
I think we're going to do more of that at that meeting, that town hall meeting. We're going to get more. I think we're going to do some focus groups to get more feedback.
More feedback?
I
Okay.
believe so. If
Okay.
I can check on that though. If we do have those compiled, we can present those.
Okay.
I think that the phrase on the website said it would be going through April 7th, I think is.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. I wasn't exactly sure. Yep.
I appreciate staff putting that survey together, and would encourage everybody to go online to the city website and fill out that survey. And then, do we have the actual paper copies available now to pass out to residents that don't have access to the internet?
I believe they are available. I think I've seen some at the rec center. There's paper copies. I think there might be. I don't know if there's any out here, but we can make sure there's paper copies. And do you guys want some to hand out, or yeah we can. Well, it's SurveyMonkey though.
Do you think we could have some computer kiosks at the rec center that
Yeah,
if
we could
folks
do
didn't
that.
do it, that we could encourage them to,
Yeah.
hey, we've got 4 laptops set up. Did you do the survey?
Sure, because
Come
it's
on
pretty
over."
short, I think.
Or just ask them to provide an email address and we can email them the list, or if they want to do that. If they can't stick around to fill it out online, that they can sign up to receive the link or something.
Yeah.
If they're not receiving the link, I mean, why would you want paper? I mean, more for someone who doesn't have a
Right,
computer.
okay.
So that you have that whole thing, you kind of.
Right, for those that attended, that didn't know about it, and wanted to go home later and fill it out, that you could.
But we could have those cards in
Right.
So we can keep it more general until we meet for the council retreat this weekend, and if you decide there's more specific agenda items, we could start publicizing it then. I'm sorry, Jack.
If I may ask, will we have some of that survey back? Is it kind of drifting in?
It is, but it's, I don't think you want to report on it until it's final.
Well,
We have an April 7th date, and it's through SurveyMonkey, so I think the results are compiled
limited.
probably once it's done.
Mr. Urban?
I think it would be appropriate to have at least one agenda item regarding 38th Avenue, and either an update on what's happening and/or a discussion around the future of 38th Avenue. So I'll put that out there that we should at least address that issue at the town hall meeting.
It's going to be a big issue, and it would be a shame to miss it. You just really can't.
Do you want that council-driven? Does somebody on council want to do a presentation? We can prepare it for you, or you want staff to give a presentation just where it's at? You guys can answer questions about it. Just do a council or staff update, and then you guys can take the heat for the policy
And then again,
decisions.
so you'd also bring up like the BID and some efforts that are being made there
Yep.
and all those steps that are in place.
Okay. So far, and then my state of the city kind of addresses it just real briefly, but then we'll have a more detailed discussion about 38th and its status. Okay, so we'll do a general state of the city, 38th Avenue, Q&A,
And then if something comes up from our retreat.
and then something from the retreat.
Okay.
Okay?
Financial issues certainly ought to be on there.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, Patrick, on the paper surveys, is somebody from the city collecting those and then we're inputting them in the SurveyMonkey?
I don't know. I don't know. I think now that I mentioned that, the paper survey, I think I saw at the rec center was a park and rec survey they're doing, probably. So I don't know if you can enter them into SurveyMonkey or not, if you can do it all from the same computer, if it recognizes your.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah, so I don't know if we're doing paper. I'll check with staff. I don't know exactly how that's working. We'll make sure we get it out to many people as we can.
Mr. Fitzgerald? No? Nope, okay. All right, do we have any other staff reports other than that?
I don't.
Okay.
Nope.
Elected official reports? Anybody?
First of all, I'd like to wish everybody a happy St. Patrick's Day, and I see one of our council members.
Hello?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I didn't see you.
Yeah,
I
Oh,
forgot
okay,
all
all right.
And this is an I wish
Oh, green.
Mr. Fitzpatrick, right?
Yeah, yeah. I just wanted to mention to everybody that the Wheat Ridge Business District is ready with their landscaping grants. So if you know a business who's interested in improving their landscaping, they should go over and look into a landscape grant.
Thank you. Anyone else? Let me add, this Wednesday, we have actually, it's considered a pretty important open house. It's right here at City Hall, and it's put on by our chief engineer, Mark Westberg. It's a discussion of the Wheat Ridge floodplains. And why it's important is because that affects the cost of your property insurance, and our city is doing everything they can to reduce that cost by really looking at all the areas that are involved that could be in or out of the floodplain. And the city receives the price of that, or excuse me, the rating that the city has goes down when we hold a public meeting. So that public meeting is this Wednesday, 5 to 7. And would be nice if people would attend that. Their very property could be involved. So that's all from me. Anything else? If not, then let's close the meeting. All in favor? Meeting is closed.